What's going on, people? This is your boy DJ A-Ron alongside my brother, as always, Cornbread, for another episode of the A Squared podcast. He is looking everywhere but at the screen, but that's normal right here on the A Squared podcast, so we're good with that. So with that being said, today we have a very special guest joining us on the A Squared podcast. Antonio, would you like to do the honors of introducing our special guest for today?
Absolutely. To the listeners out there and the viewers, make sure y'all like and subscribe to the A Squared podcast. Like I said, we are always hitting y'all with different interviews. You cannot predict who we're having on next, and that's the part that I love about our podcast. But me and my girl, man, have been on this whiskey tequila kick and trying to educate ourselves, right? And so for my birthday back in October, you know, me and Aaron, they got the same birthday. She surprised me with a little taste testing at Whiskey of the World in Atlanta, man. And so with that, she said, hey, there's a master class. I said, well, hey, I've never done one. You never done one. Let's hook it up.
A master class at whiskey.
Master class of whiskey. It's a person that's going to educate you on all the things that you want to know, which we're going to get into the company and all those things. But there's a young man that I felt like he educated me well beyond what I paid for. And then we had a great conversation after the session. So we decided to have him on the A Squared podcast. So today, listeners, welcome Todd Richman. What's up, man?
Welcome.
Gentlemen, what a pleasure. It's great to be here. I've had a chance to go through what you do on your podcasts and the wider range of guests and topics you talk about. So it's great to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So all the guests, we always give them an opportunity to kind of start from the beginning, or let's tell a little bit of history about yourself so the listeners know who you are and what you do.
All right. So I'll keep it as short as possible just because it's been a very indirect route to get me where I am today. Todd Richman from New York, born and raised, currently living in St. Petersburg, Florida. Which is an awesome city. If you ever come through, please let me know. And I started after graduating college. I got my degree in communication theory and research, and that's a result of two things. One, I always wanted to understand how people communicated with each other. However, I also got a D in psychology and statistics. So we found a little more of an oblique path there. Worked in restaurants on and off my whole life. I worked as a bartender, not like the craft cocktail bartending you see at places in the ATL like Holman and Finch and, high-end places of that nature. I was doing more just sling and ring, let's make money. I worked in clubs. I was a nightclub DJ. I cooked in restaurants. And then in 2007, I started selling wine in New York. And through selling wine, I had a chance to start working with spirits. And in addition to sales, part of our job was providing education on our brands, how to sell them as a retail store owner or a restaurant operator, such as a bartender, bar manager, sommelier. That led me to spirits. Through there, I was working with a brand back in 2009 called Green Chartreuse, made by three monks in the French Alps who don't speak. Then after that, I went on as the corporate mixologist, which is a wonderful title for someone who just provides education and creates a cocktail strategy for a company called Sidney Frank. Their main product was Jägermeister. They also had a vodka. They also had a sake and a honey beer.
Jaeger is crazy.
Don't take me back to those days. Please don't make me go back to those days.
Listen, it's the greatest German Amaro after dinner drink. I'll always have a soft spot with it, but y'all can keep the Red Bull. No thanks. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, I went on to work at Diageo as one of their masters of whiskey. Part of that program, I was also a national educator for them, which really what got me into whiskey. A lot of intense training there, mostly on Scotch, a little bit of American. Then I went to work for a fine wine distributor selling wine again, geeky spirits, smaller territory, less travel. After that, I was working in beverage technology, and now I have the pleasure for working for Heaven and Hill, which is one of the most storied American whiskey producers, importers, suppliers. They do it all. They have some incredible brands. I was with their craft division called Sampson & Surrey, and we've integrated the company since Sampson & Surrey was acquired. Some of the brands I work on include Widow Jane, Few Spirits, whiskeys, and Bren, French single malt. But Sampson & Surrey also has Tequila Ocho, Mezcal Vago, to the better agave spirits out there made by people who really care about making great products. But my focus is the whiskey. Additionally, Heaven Hill has a portfolio including Elijah Craig, Evan Williams, Larceny, JTS Brown, Heaven Hill's Grain to Glass Project. So really diverse book of brands with, again, some of the best American whiskeys out there, bourbon and rye. They do a wheat whiskey. My focus, however, is the Widow Jane portfolio of bourbon and rye, Fuse Spirits, which makes bourbon, rye, American single malt, and Bren, which makes a French single malt.
Love that, man. That's a lot. That's a lot of information just in that right there.
That's a lot. Yeah, it's
So-
a lot.
Over your journey, what to you has been the easiest thing to sell? Was it wine? Was it spirits? Was it whiskey? What do you think is like, all right, that's an easy cash cow. I can sell that. But this one, I might need to work on my craft and selling this.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I really, really love the brands I currently work with. And my position currently is a more indirect style of sales. I'm part of what's called a trade advocacy team. We're sort of the in-between sales and marketing. So we host events. We do trainings. In fact, I'm at the Perry Hotel here in Naples. I'm about to do a training for their restaurant staff that just opened up because in concert with the sales team, through my relationships with the bar operator, they brought in a bunch of our portfolio. So my job is to go up there, tell the staff about them, give them a little more information because knowledge is power. And that's true with whiskey. I think the thing that I love most about my current position is I stand behind every single brand that we have. They're all excellent. They all serve a purpose. They come in various price points. Some of them are more value driven, where a restaurant can make profit on the second pour. As Bernie Lubbers, our Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond ambassador, says, some of them, they're unique. They're unicorns. And that to me is the easiest part of the job, is knowing that I have an incredible portfolio. I'm part of a team and being able to provide education to the public, or we call them in the industry consumers, guests at trade shows like yourself, or to the trade, which is your bartenders, your retailers, your servers, your directors of beverage. There's that side of it. So advocacy, we want to help turn people into champions of our brands because we're champions of our brands.
So I would like to ask this. Prior to becoming a professional DJ, I was in sales as well. And we were always taught to, have a product that can essentially sell itself. Like, without you having to push it onto anybody, it sells itself because of like for you, it'd be the taste. It would be how it makes you feel, so on and so forth. What would be one of your favorite products that you believe that actually sells itself?
I would say, God, there are just so many, and they all work for different reasons. The great thing about having this portfolio is we have this giant Pantone wheel. And you're exactly right, A-Ron. Sales is not about me pushing a product. The product is almost secondary. It's about the connection with the customer. It's about the connection, like with our connection, Antonio, at the masterclass. It's about how I make people feel or try to make them feel while teaching them about the brands. Because, Antonio, we were in that masterclass and, there was a gentleman there who had this incredible intention of, contributing to the class. But some of the stuff he was talking about wasn't technically accurate. And that's fine. But true sales, is about making someone feel good about taking their time to participating in the class and coming away going, you know what, I had a chance to try the whiskey. They were really good, but I really enjoyed the time in the class. I'm going to support that brand. There's a scholarly approach where I can go in and say, you're wrong. And when he's putting himself out there in a vulnerable moment in a room full of strangers, maybe he had a couple ounces of liquid courage before he came to the class. But they're all easy to sell. These brands are easy to sell because I love people. And part of our job as advocacy is not leading with price, not leading with value, but it's about understanding what they're looking for in their program. It's scanning the back bar, scanning their shelves and saying, all right, you have a couple heirloom corn whiskeys. Have you thought about trying Baby Jane bourbon to really round out that category for you? And then you start telling the features and benefits. But that's 10, 15, 30 minutes into the appointment. Like, I want to get to know the person that I'm working with, whether it's the bar operator or the retailer. And, the whiskeys will sell themselves because they're well made and they're made by people who care. And beautiful facilities with some of the best quality ingredients possible.
And that's crazy. You remember that too, right? Like, so for context to the listeners out there was an individual who was out there. So he didn't try to challenge Todd. So I didn't get that like he was like trying to have a back and forth, but he might say certain, we're in a class, so that means we're learning. So he would say something and then Todd would tweak his reality or tweak or update his information, right? So that he understood, okay, that, let's say it was true back then, but it's not true now. Or maybe this might change the reality of it. So it's funny you remember that because I did was seeing that. But you handled that well. So if your bosses are listening out there, he did a great job.
I'll throw
give him a raise.
their Instagrams in the chat. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna send them this podcast, part of my recap. But it's a funny thing because, the three of us, we're all putting products out, whether it's our own individual products or your podcast. And a big part of working on trade advocacy is, telling people why these brands are special. And it has nothing to do with me. I'm just a megaphone. I'm just a mouthpiece for these brands. It's the people who made them, the people who've been working on them, our marketing department. It's coordinating with our sales team who does the job of putting together the pricing and the programming behind it, because I don't know how familiar you are with the beverage alcohol industry, but we're in a 3-tier system, which means I don't go out and sell. Like, I don't fill orders. I don't load. I mean, I would load a truck if they needed me to, if it helped get my order to the account.
That's hilarious.
But we have distributors, and they represent not only the brands I represent, but a bunch of others as well. And because of that, it's this idea of how do I support them? How do I support our own sales team, which works with the distributor? And a big part of that is just being out there and encouraging people to not only try our brands, but learn about our brands as well and what makes them stand out.
Good. So before we get into your company that you work for now, I still want to know a little bit more about you. So I want to know the story of when you took your first drink, and then what's your drink of choice now?
So my first official drink as a law-abiding citizen at the age of 21.
No, I want to. Don't lie.
Because we encourage. First of all, it's not lying. It's media trading.
For sure.
No, we always encourage everybody to enjoy our brands responsibly.
Absolutely.
That's a big part of it. I would say the first drink I really remember that blew my doors off, that made me want to get into this industry. Man, I think of a couple special moments, and, they've all been great. My first cocktail I ever had, my first real serious cocktail, was when I started working for this one importing company, and he made me a Green Point, which was rye whiskey, probably Rittenhouse, one of the brands I represent, sweet vermouth, and a little bit of green chartreuse. And it was delicious. It was the first time, so I'd never had a Manhattan before. I had never had an old fashioned. I was drinking 1-in-1s, tequila sodas, vodka sodas, whatever I could afford, because I just started in the wine business. And that cocktail, it was just like that scene in The Matrix where it just plugs in. It's like, whoa, I know.
So you had a real cocktail. You didn't even have it straight?
That was, I was working with a different spirit at the time.
Okay.
And so the spirit I worked with was part of the cocktail. So
nice.
I had it straight. I had done tastings on it, but it was almost like this moment where it's like, let me show you what I can do. Like, I'm a guitar salesman who knows like 3 chords, and I just handed it off to, Eric Clapton. It was wild.
Yeah.
The first drink I remember having with the company I worked for was many, many years ago. I was working for a different company at the time, and I was at this bourbon bar in Louisville, and I saw this one bottle, and it didn't look like anything flashy. It wasn't like this hyper extravagant package. It was just simple bottle, red label, just a JTS Brown on it. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "That is a bottled and bond whiskey. That is a bourbon made by this company, Heaven Hill." And I'm like, "All right, tell me more." He hands me this whiskey, and it was incredible. Bottled and bond whiskeys, minimum 4 years old, and goes through some of the most strictest regulations in American whiskey. There are a ton of rules. It's a very regulated spirit. I tried this whiskey. I hadn't had anything like that before. And that's when I knew that eventually my path would lead me here. Before that, it was beer in college and whatever ridiculous fruity stuff, the woo-woos, the Alabama Slammers, all those drinks, which do
The
play
Long
a
Islands,
part.
that's still mine. Long Islands, that's what I do.
Long Island's.
Every time
Long
we go
Island.
out somewhere and he orders a Long Island, I walk off because I cannot stand next to this guy.
They serve a purpose. Hey,
They
listen,
do. They get to the
I will
point.
never. They get to the point. Yeah, they cut through it.
They're like 7 and they just pour it in one cup. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, what is that?
Yeah, they do the same thing in the tiki world. It's called a zombie.
A zombie,
And those-
okay.
Yeah,
All right.
zombies. Find a good rum bar and have a zombie. Some
man,
places
I'm
only
trying
put a 2-drink maximum on them.
Jesus.
So here's a question I have for you that I always wanted to ask somebody in your industry. If you go into a liquor store, you walk around, you see all these different brands, all these different types of bottles and the styles of bottles that they have. How important do you think it is for the style of bottle? Like it seems like they always have these exciting looking, like the
Like
woman,
artwork.
it looks like the woman is holding it or something
Yeah.
like that. They always look crazy like that. How important do you think that is?
Packaging is a big part of it. People drink with their eyes, and anybody who says otherwise before they have an affinity for the brand, they've never been served anything out of a dirty glass. It's if they're going to disagree with the idea that people drink with their eyes. I'll tell you a story, and funny enough, ready for this, and for y'all listening out here, I'm holding up a bottle of Baby Jane bourbon,
Okay.
heirloom corn bourbon made at the Widow Jane Distillery and with our partners in Kentucky as well. This is shaped like a water tower in Brooklyn. If you ever
Wow.
go to Red Hook, Brooklyn, you'll see these water towers up there. It's a short bottle. It's got a little bit of a diagonal, like scalloping on there. And that was by design because the package is a tribute to the roots of the distillery in Brooklyn, New York. It's funny. We did something at our national sales meeting where one of our marketing directors got up and talked about Elijah Craig. Y'all know the Elijah Craig bottle. It's got that very specific, almost hourglass shape. They asked people to draw it from memory. And a lot of people got really, really close. So in addition to what's in the bottle, which they don't get to try until they actually buy their first bottle of Baby Jane or Elijah Craig or any of those brands, they're going to gravitate towards their eyes. Now, sometimes, and there are certain brands out there where they put a lot more into the package versus the inside. And again, we're not in the business of naming names. I believe that there's a brand for everyone out there.
Yeah.
And some of the best whiskeys I have come in very simple, straightforward bottles. But packaging is incredibly important. There's a ton of research done about labels. There's a ton of regulation on labels. For example, an American whiskey bourbon, it has to say if it's a straight bourbon, if it's got an age statement on it, much like, here we go, the Widow Jane, aged 10 years, it says on the label. That means the minimum, the youngest liquid in here is 10 years old. Because of that, that's what they put on. Because there's whiskey as old as 15 years in here. But would you buy a bottle that says, hey, I'd love to try your Widow Jane, it's got a tiny bit of 15, or would you love knowing that the baseline is 10 years old?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you want the transparency, and not every category has that. I love working in whiskey because I like transparency, and packaging is incredibly important. Some of it is historic, some of it evokes a feeling, and there are a lot of different ways that brands put their bottle out there. A lot of them are designed like this Evan Williams bottled in bond. It tells you everything you need to know. It's bottled under U.S. government supervision. It's 100 proof, which is by law what a bottled in bond is. Minimum 4 years old. It's Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. That means it's made in Kentucky, and there's nothing in here other than what was distilled. The color, much like the color of Widow Jane and Baby Jane, comes from the barrel. They can only use new charred barrels. Everything you need to know is on the label. You have to do that by law. Those laws have been around for a very long time. And this package of a brand like Evan Williams is designed to be functional. Grab it, put it in the well. This design, again, with the Baby Jane, is designed to evoke a feeling. The water towers of Red Hook, Brooklyn. And the Widow Jane's just a beautiful bottle that everybody can relate to. You see a bottle and we feel like we've seen this shape. It's familiar to us, but at the same time, very unique because it's not super tall, but it's also not flashy, which a lot of people relate to. They want what's inside to be reflective of the outside.
And thank you for that. And like I said, so if any of our listeners out there, if they have a masterclass coming up with Widow Jane, and hopefully if you're there, hopefully they can come and see you put on this education that you're telling us now. And so with that being said, I got something for you. Yeah.
There it is. Let's go.
I got
Look at that.
the Widow Jane, the 10-year, man. So I definitely want to, before we even talk about the company, I want to put this out there. I only got that after we left because of you. Right? I've never heard of Widow Jane before, but just going through, doing the taste test, we tried 4 or 5 different alcohols there, but just that conversation with you. So you are part of it. Even though you might not think you are part of selling it, man. So we appreciate that. So well, go ahead. Yeah, no problem.
No,
so tell us a little bit about it too.
All right, so we'll start at the beginning, and thank you for that, by the way. A big part of what we do is we always want to represent the brands in our company to the best of our ability. The liquid in the bottle speaks for itself, regardless of the price point. Everything that I just showed you, gentlemen, today, it speaks to the care that's put in to making it. And that's from the grains we select, the barrels we select for aging. In the case of Widow Jane, where we're buying whiskey and we're buying it already aged, it's our blending team doing the work. It's the people packaging it. It's the people writing on the label or manning the machines that put the label on. There's a lot of steps that go into making it. So we're always representing them. When you talk to people who work for a brand, their main mission is it's never about me. You could see me or any of my colleagues speak about these whiskeys and the experience will be incredibly consistent because we really pride ourselves on our education and learning about not only the brands, but the category, because no one wants to hear just something that's hyper-focused on a brand. They want to hear about a category. Like we're talking about college football, or talking about DJs and talking about culture in general. I want to hear about what the current landscape is like in your gentleman's world as much as I want to hear about what you do, because that gets me excited and that tells me how you guys stand apart from that.
Absolutely. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Widow Jane. What makes them unique, where somebody might be, it's the weekend coming up, so somebody might be going out, hey, let me try a new whiskey or bourbon. Why should they pick Widow Jane over something else? That's
awesome and an absolute pleasure. Happy to do it. Widow Jane's a disruptor. So when we think about bourbon, and I'm going to dive into a little bit of the history here, it was back in 1620 that Sir George Thorpe was one of the first people to ever distill corn. He came over from Europe. Everybody brought their stills with them. Just like when you and I were DJs, A-Ron, we were bringing our turntables, and 6 milk crates.
It ain't the greatest.
Wild. It's wild. Yeah, we were humping that gear to every gig we could. But that was, for us, that's a commodity. And back then, even to this day, distilled spirits were an agricultural product. They didn't have currency back in the 1600s or the 1700s. So they would have whatever grain they had to feed their family, and then they would distill or ferment the rest of it, and they would trade that. And if you don't believe me that spirits aren't an agricultural product or aren't still to this day, what have you gotten offered to help a friend move? Bottle of wine? Bottle of tequila, bottle of whiskey, pizza?
Yeah,
pizza?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. No, I've definitely had help friends out there be like, yeah, I'll give you a bottle of something special for you to enjoy. So bourbon back then was nothing like what it is today, but I'll give you a little bit on the rules of bourbon, and then we'll talk about Widow Jane, because today bourbon can only be made in the U.S. You'll never hear about a Canadian bourbon or a Japanese bourbon or an English bourbon, because bourbon in the 60s was declared by the government as of unique character and uniquely American. So it's American made. And it can only be called bourbon in America. It can only be made in America. The mix of grains used to make whiskey, so they'll grind up all the grains. It's usually a blend of corn, mostly corn, got to be 51%, followed by a little wheat or rye. There are wheated whiskeys out there, and then there are rye whiskeys out there. and then a little bit of barley. And all the barley does is it doesn't provide flavor. It helps provide the enzymes because these grains get ground up, they get cooked because you got to convert those starches into sugars. Just like raw corn on the cob tastes like corn flavored cardboard.
Yeah.
But you cook it, what happens? Sweet. It's good. I've never seen anyone bite into a raw sweet potato and been like, that was a great idea. So we cook the grains, we then ferment it, and then we distill that, and distilling concentrates the alcohol, separates the alcohol from the water. We'll distill it twice to get it to the right ABV. It's got to go into a new charred American oak barrel, and then it's got to be aged for a minimum 2 years to be called a straight whiskey. And then after 4 years, you don't have to put an age statement in unless you want to. And that really started commercially in Kentucky in the late 1800s. Evan Williams was one of the first licensed distillers. And it's because there was a lot of corn there, and whiskey was an agricultural product. They would put it in barrels and send it down the river where it would end up on Bourbon Street. And there are a lot of different reasons that bourbon gets its name. Fast forward today, you have some incredible distilleries making fantastic bourbon out there, including ours, Heaven Hill. There's Wild Turkey that does a great job as well. They've been around forever. Jim Beam, and a lot of these are now part of these legacy distilleries that have been doing it that way for a while. And a distillery can either make, age, and then combine their own barrels to make a style bourbon like we do at Heaven Hill, or you have a distillery like Widow Jane, where based in New York, they ended up gravitating towards whiskey after the previous owner, the former owner, was dabbling in rum and chocolate liqueur. He was an entrepreneur. They began getting barrels that were picked out for them. And they originally started as selling as a single barrel bourbon. This is over 7 years ago. So they would take one barrel, they would bottle it with this water from mines in upstate New York. And these mines were fascinating because they're originally cement mines, but they stopped being used in the 70s, and cement's made from limestone. Limestone has a ton of great minerals, calcium, magnesium, which are great for water for whiskey. And calcium and magnesium removes iron and manganese from water, which are real bad for whiskey. And also water can leave its own thumbprint. If you think about what goes into making whiskey, you got your grains, you got your yeast to ferment it, you got the type of barrel you use, the type of still you use, but water is a big part of that thumbprint. And so we use this really great water from the Widow Jane mine up in upstate New York. Then years ago, we switched over to blending and making what are called small batch bourbons. Our 10-year-old, which we talked about, is a blend of 5 barrels, minimum 10 years old. And the blending team is 3 people, part of a team of about 15 to now 17 people. It's a small distillery. It's a full-time crew. They all work. Their whole job is working on this brand. And they're creative, they're innovators, but they're working they're working with a lot of barrels from Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee that are of an age point that they like, a flavor profile that they like, and they'll taste every day, and they'll blend every day. So they'll take 5 barrels, the 5 best barrels that represent the flavor characteristics that they want in Widow Jane. There's a little bit of cherry in there and different spices and subtle sweetness as well as oak notes. They'll blend it. It's non-chill filtered. We'll geek out about chill filtration in a sec. And they proof it down with that water from the mines, that mineral-rich water. And that gives it this real viscosity, this texture, this mouthfeel. When it comes to tasting notes, there are a lot of different ways to look at a whiskey. And one thing I love about Widow Jane is how it feels. It's very rich. It's got a real rich texture. You can tell what you're sipping on was made by a small team with a lot of love.
I love that, man. Thank you. Thank you for that. I know it was one thing that I took from your masterclass too, is you said, judge the whiskey off of your second sip. I think you said after the first time, you could have ate something. You said it was like toothpaste, right? Like you have some orange juice after you brush your teeth, it tastes nasty, but judge it off the second sip because you clean your palate. So that's just one thing I want to put out to the listeners of one thing I remember that you said. So I like that.
Yeah. Always take 2 tastes. Yeah.
One thing I want to ask DJ before you could ask a question. Sure. So there's PETA out there for, obviously animals, right? Of any harm to animals that anybody does. And they protest, right, all the time, right? There was DARE for drugs and all those things, right? Is there any company for, let's say, alcohol? And if there is, do they come to any places that you show up to?
Not really. I've never seen any kind of, in my experience, I've been doing this since 2007. I've never seen any out and out protests. And one of the reasons is that if people don't like alcohol, they're not around it. It's not like Prohibition where barrels were getting dumped and people were forced to, or not forced, I should say, but they chose to buy bathtub gin or poorly distilled spirits or moonshine and real moonshine. If it has a barcode on it and it's in a liquor store in this day and age, it's not moonshine. No, you go to a place where it's you're gonna get lost on the way in and the way out.
My cousin brought some from Arkansas.
Yeah.
And I tasted just a little bit of it. And no, never again. Never again. I see why they were going blind if that was the real truth behind it.
Yeah. And
it's powerful.
It's powerful. It comes off the still at a very high proof. And additionally, if they're not separating the dangerous chemicals from the first part of distillation from the hearts that it's called that we want to drink that can be in the barrel, that's a real health risk. But I've never seen protests of any kind. And to be honest, a lot of beverage alcohol companies work with DISCUS. That's the Distilled Spirits Council of the U.S. And there's set standards of social responsibility that are a big part of our job, is to encourage people to enjoy our brands, but enjoy them responsibility. It's for what does someone want to do? Take a $20 Uber or $10,000 and never drive again because they consumed too much of whatever alcoholic beverage. I think we're not seeing that, prohibition. Like no one's going to come up to me in the staff training tomorrow or today or any day and be like,
that bottle down. Put
that bottle down.
Give it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
okay.
That I've never heard of that. People
and
who
me
choose
either. That's
not
why
to drink.
I asked. That's why I asked. I was like, I wonder if there's, a company out there.
You kind of, when you mentioned that you find the bourbon here in America, can you explain that a little bit more for the people that are tuning in and why that is? Antonio and I, we love to travel. So this is one thing that we would like to know too.
So yes, and that's a very important thing to think about is that bourbon can only be made in the U.S. We sell it everywhere. Every liquor company that makes a bourbon, they're able to sell it all over the world as long as there's a company and an importer that wants to take it. Our brands are available in France and in the UK and anywhere that wants to bring in a distilled spirit, but it just can't be made anywhere outside of the United States. Like they can make whiskey that has a certain percentage of corn in it that's aged in new charred barrels. It could follow every step of the bourbon making process. However, that can't be called bourbon if it's made outside the U.S. And that's just because bourbon is so tied into America's history for a very long time. The bourbon industry has done a lot of amazing things in the sense that, it provided jobs for people to make barrels back in the day because bourbon requires new charred barrels. Let's talk about the taxes that come in from selling spirits. The Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, as we talked about earlier, Bottled and Bond was designed to protect people because before 1897, there were companies that were making whiskey and putting tobacco spit and creosote and tea extract, and people were dying. And granted, it was the late 1800s and everything was going to kill you back then.
Yeah.
You get a paper cut, they don't like your chances. But the Bottled and Bond Act ensured high standards of quality and regulation of whiskey made in America. And it was mostly bourbon at that time. And bourbon still represents a large portion of the aged spirits, not only in the U.S., but that is exported around the world. Now, over in the UK and Japan, they're making Scotch or Irish whiskey, or in Japan, they make Japanese whiskey, which is made the same way as Scotch. You can make whiskey anywhere in the world. You just can't call bourbon if you're making a bourbon style whiskey outside of the U.S.
I like it. My last question to you is, what does your year look like this year, 2025? Are you going on tour so that some of our listeners, they might be able, if you're in a major city or something like that, they might be able to see you or at least follow the brand? Do you have anything you could tell us for how your year looks like?
The year's is going to be very busy. We're very excited. We're going to be doing Whiskeys of the World. So look on their website, Whiskey Washback and Whiskey Riot. We'll be involved with a lot of different events locally. Check out, obviously, Heaven Hill Brands, Fuse Spirits, Widow Jane. Online, there's a ton that's happening. American whiskey there's a lot of it. There's a lot of great whiskey out there. And we're going to be out there as a company with our advocacy team representing those spirits. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm sure, my Instagram is T Richman, TRICHMAN 727. So I'll be posting about all the events. I'll be traveling and I'll be downloading a lot of episodes of the A Squared podcast.
Hey, there you go. I like it.
I like it.
I got a question for you here.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I know the answer. You haven't seen any snow down there your way yet, have you?
No, I have not. I did. It's funny. I'm from the Northeast. I went to school in Wisconsin, and it's cold up there. And when we were in Kentucky for our national sales meeting, it was really, really cold. No snow where I live in Florida yet. I know.
It was in Destin, right? Was it Destin?
Yep, all on the Panhandle. There was a ton of snow for them. A friend of mine sent me a picture. She runs a bar up in Pensacola, great whiskey bar called Old Hickory. Her and her husband and their toddler were making little snowmen, which,
once in a lifetime thing.
It's wild. I know y'all got some snow up there in Atlanta.
Yeah, and I'm up here by Chicago, so it's, yes. Yeah. We've been hit a couple of times already.
Chicago gets so cold, I feel like people take it personally up there.
Oh, they do. And listen, my final thing for you.
Yeah.
Tonio has been doing, the tastings and everything like that. I've been to only one tasting, and that was in Mexico for tequila.
Great.
I'm asking you, though. I'm a vodka drinker.
Great.
I need you to sell me on something over there to go get today. I'm going to go get it today, and I'm going to do my own review and submit that to you.
I love it. All right. As a vodka guy, I can go to whiskey. I can do anything because as a DJ, I know.
You already know.
I'm gonna give you. Since you're in Chicago, I'm gonna give you a few different things to review. Definitely check out Widow Jane.
Okay.
It's a distillery, an incredible distillery just outside of Chicago in Evanston, Illinois, called FEW Spirits. They make some great whiskeys. If you like coffee, check out their cold cut bourbon. It's real interesting. It's bourbon that they make and they proof it down. So they take it out of the barrel at about 122 proof or 61% alcohol, and they bring it down to 93 proof using cold brew coffee instead of water. So it's bourbon with cold brew coffee in it, and it's delicious. And tequila ocho. Think of it like wine. It's they get their agave from single estate ranches. If you like a little smoke, check out Mezcal Vago, VAGO. It's delicious. And then the last thing I can think of is for vodka. Are you a citrus fan? Like, do you like lemon, lime, grapefruit?
Yeah.
Deep Eddy grapefruit vodka.
Okay.
It's delicious. It's delicious. I love it with a little soda water. Super refreshing. Great vodka flavor. Their straight vodka is fantastic as well. Yeah, these are all brands in the portfolio I work for, but I have nothing but great things to say about them.
That's amazing. I'm gonna try them all. I'm definitely gonna try them all. I just got a cocktail smoker too for Christmas, so I'm gonna see what I can do with that too.
Good smoked old fashioned, good smoked Manhattan. Play around with the wood chips. Try some applewood, cherry wood.
It came with all of them.
Yep, great, love it. So what's next for you two? What do you got going on?
We're traveling to see you very soon. And I'm going to be there this time, and we're going to sit there, and we're going to go through the whole thing. That's what's going to happen.
I can't wait.
We're coming wherever you're going. But seriously, A Square Podcast, when we set out on this journey, the whole point of it was to be open to everyone. Sit down with everyone, learn different things from, whether you're an actor, you're an athlete, in your industry, you're a district attorney, doesn't matter. We want to learn from everyone. So this was a real pleasure today. And we want to thank you for coming on the A Square Podcast.
I love it. Thank you so much for this opportunity, gentlemen.
Sure.
Thank you for the support of not only Widow Jane, but the entire family of Heaven Hill Brands.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your time. This was great getting to know you. I will definitely look you guys up when I come to Atlanta, and I've got my subscription already, so I'll be downloading. A lot of flying, a lot of airtime.
And definitely shout out to your team, too, for making this happen.
Yes,
too.
thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, tell everybody thank you, man. So we definitely going to link up again, and, we're going to talk.
I can't wait. I look forward to it. And A-Ron, please send me some of your sets as well.
I got you. That's
for
easy.
the gym.
I got you. No problem.
Love it.
Well, this is DJ A-Ron, Cornbread, Todd. We are here at the A Square Podcast. Thank you all for joining us today. And catch us next time on the A Square Podcast.